Hey, what's going on, everybody? In this video, we're going to be doing a book review of Prisoners of Geography, 10 Maps That Explain Everything About the World by Tim Marshall. And I was looking for a book on geopolitics, and I found this on some forum online. And I'm really glad I found it because this, I felt, was an awesome book. Had a couple of little problems, but overall, I thought the author did a really good job explaining a lot about basically current events based on maps, and that's, I don't know, it's just really cool. Basically what he does is he takes a geographic area and, for example, like China or Europe or the Arctic, and he, shows how a bunch of different geological features determine how different states and countries act certain ways and have traditionally viewed the world through certain lenses, or why they behave the way they do. Even centuries apart, they partake in fairly similar actions. I thought that was really cool, and actually most of his arguments are really well done, and it's hard to argue against them because the evidence that he presents is so convincing, I felt. Alright, so let's start with a couple of the bad things, and they're really nitpicky in this one, to be honest, because I felt it was such a good book. There's no in-text citations, but in this case, I'm really not going to consider that really a bad thing, because a lot of the citations would basically be modern, like, political documents, and like treaties and that sort of stuff, which most people aren't going to read anyways. So that I didn't really care too much. And the only other nitpicky thing I felt was, and that's basically not even an argument against the book, it's actually more just my own personal feelings, is some of the chapters I felt could have been longer, basically, because everything else was so good. I felt some of the sections, such as the map on Europe and the map on Africa, he should have broken them up a little bit more. That way he could devote more time to it, I guess you could say. For example, he starts the book with chapters on Russia, China, and the United States, and they go so well. But then he does like a chapter in Europe, and it's also still done well. It just feels like a lot of these segments could have been expanded on a lot more if he would have broken down the map a little bit, instead of dealing with all of Europe, deal with certain regions of Europe and give them each their own chapter. Like, for example, I really want to learn a lot more about like the Balkan area, region of the world, since that was like a major political instigation area, I guess you could say, for World War One. Which is like one of my favorite topics to study. But I mean, it's covered, but it's just not covered enough, I guess, in my opinion. But like I said, that's more of me just wanting the book to be bigger, not really too much of a critique of the book itself. Because I could say, and also the same thing for the map of Africa, because he covers the whole continent of Africa in one big chapter, and I just felt like it could have been, if he had done maybe two different maps for, like, so he could do two different chapters, that would have been, he would have had more time to explain a bunch of different things more thoroughly. But like I said, that's my own personal opinion, because at first he does a whole map of the Middle East, and I originally thought, oh, it's going to be the same thing as Africa and Europe, except that he makes that chapter like 50% or 50% bigger than most of his other chapters, so he actually dedicates a lot more time to it. And I felt the Middle East chapter was done really, really well because of that, because he was able to go through a bunch of different sections and give them all a decent amount of treatment. So like I said, I just felt like maybe the African chapter and the European chapter could have been a little bit either bigger or 2 or 3 separate parts. But like I said, those are just sort of nitpicky things, to be honest. There's so many more pros to the book. Like I said, his arguments are very, very compelling. And when he relates all these things, how, certain countries did this, and that, the 16, 17, 1800s, and how they're basically trying to do the same-ish sort of thing today, it really hits home. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, a lot of the things he's trying to do. And he deals with current events quite a bit. Like, for example, I mean, the first opening chapter with Russia, he deals with the whole reason for the Crimean invasion, which happened a couple of years ago, in that event, and why Russia did that, why Ukraine did what it did, and why actually NATO, which Ukraine technically isn't a part of, doesn't actually do anything because of it. And each chapter has like events like that in them, and he does a really good job explaining why countries behave the way they do, based on politics. A good takeaway from this book is basically, especially when dealing with like international waters or waterways and that sort of thing, is choke points or pressure points, like globally, how those little areas on the map can affect basically the whole world. And that's why so much conflict and so much, political maneuvering is over these like little areas that are spread throughout the world. But yeah, it's really really interesting. For example, all the East Asian stuff, I really didn't know too much, to be honest. But I learned quite a bit about his chapter on the Koreas and Japan, and that was a really enlightening chapter as well. But anyways, after reading this book, I feel a lot more confident and understanding a lot of the motives and reasons behind current events. And for that reason alone, I'm really pleased that I picked this book up. If you like modern politics or current events, anything like that, you should definitely pick up this book. It's pretty enlightening in that regard. The author does a great job with his arguments. And yeah, he definitely doesn't put things out there willy-nilly. He always backs everything up, either with modern evidence or with historical examples. And, it's just really well done, and it's very readable. Definitely I don't remember any dry slogs through this book. And I'm just, like I said, it's 10 maps, so there's 10 different areas of the world, which in the end is pretty much the whole world by the time he's done with it. Except maybe, I don't think there's anything in Australia. So, sorry, Australians. But other than that, he covers pretty much the whole world almost. So, pretty cool book overall. And I'm giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And just really well pleased. I don't know if Tim Marshall has written anything else, but after this review, I'm going to go look him up and see what else he's written. But always remember, read victoriously.